The Trump administration says the Chinese Communist Party has committed genocide against its Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. The U.S. government gives China tens of millions of dollars every year, but a new report says Trump has slashed that amount by half. Wuhan's Virology Institute reportedly received support from Western countries. It's the same facility that may have close ties to the origin of the CCP virus. Biden's selection for head of the intelligence community suggests the new administration sees China as a global competitor instead of an adversary. And the CEO of one of the biggest firms on Wall Street says the Biden administration will adopt a softer tone towards China. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Despite its term coming to a close, the Trump administration continues to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for its human rights abuses. They say the regime has committed genocide against the Uyghur Muslims minority.
Mike Pompeo is making the most of his remaining hours as Secretary of State. In his statement, he said, "After careful examination, I have determined that the People's Republic of China, under the direction and control of the CCP, has committed genocide against the predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang." He added he thinks the genocide is still going on and that it's a systematic attempt to destroy the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The move is one of the toughest measures to condemn the Chinese Communist Party. The state secretary also said the CCP committed crimes against humanity in the region, including forced labor, forced sterilization, and torture. Research from a Washington-based think tank confirmed that over 500,000 Uyghurs were forced to pick cotton. In a tweet that has since been taken down, the Chinese embassy said that they stopped Uyghur women from being quote-unquote baby-making machines. The designation follows intensive internal debates after Congress passed legislation on December 27th. The U.S. administration has 90 days to determine whether forced labor or other crimes against Uyghurs and minorities constitute crimes against humanity or genocide. Reporting by Don Tran, NTD News.
The U.S. government used to send tens of millions of dollars more to China as foreign aid, but a new report shows that budget took a drastic dive under the Trump administration. NTD's Juliet Song has the story.
A new report says President Trump slashed government aid to China by more than half in just 1 year. UK news outlet The Spectator claims it has a report of U.S. spending on China. It says the report comes from the Office of Management and Budget. That's the government agency that helps the U.S. president on budget issues. The report shows America's direct aid to China dropped by more than 50% last year. It fell from over $60 million to $30 million. Budget on strategic competition with China increased by over 10%. The U.S. also set aside $300 million for a fund to counter China's global influence. Under Trump, many China support programs saw major spending cuts or operations halted. One example is the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. It used to pour $7 million into modernizing China's aviation and energy infrastructure. Now its money is redirected to support activities to counter China's debt diplomacy efforts. Another example is the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. The Trump administration cut the CDC's funding for its Chinese counterparts by over 70%. The report says, quote, "China is a rich country and its research activities should not be subsidized by U.S. taxpayers." The report also says the U.S. received billions from imposing duties on imported Chinese goods, $60 billion to be precise. A U.S.-based China expert says the budget cut is long overdue. He adds Beijing has been sending aid to third world countries.
And its purpose of sending aid is to pull these countries to their side and counter the U.S. together. So the American government would be giving itself a disadvantage if it keeps sending aid to China, which basically is paying your enemy.
Heng He says that a large portion of China aid is to improve the rule of law and human rights in the country. But over the years, China has been deteriorating in both regards.
So the Chinese Communist Party isn't using the money at places where America wants it to. We haven't seen any improvements in China's human rights.
Heng He says the budget slash is more of a symbolic move. as the amount of China aid is minimal compared to the GDP of both countries. He thinks it's more of a reflection on Trump's shift on China policy. China doesn't just receive aid from the U.S. Japan used to be one of China's top foreign aid donors, but stopped sending money after China grew to be the second largest economy. NTD reached out to the Office of Management and Budget for comment, but didn't get a response before airtime. Juliet Song, NTD News.
China's economy grew more than 2% last year. That's according to China's official data released on Monday. But not all Chinese experts say that figure is credible.
China announced on Monday that its economy grew by 2.3% in 2020. It claims that China is the only major economy that grew during the pandemic. But a renowned Chinese scholar publicly questioned the economic statistics of the country at a recent financial forum. Yu Yongding is an economist and a member of China's top think tank, the China Social Sciences Academy. According to Chinese media reports, Yu said in his speech at a financial forum in Beijing last December that, quote, "I have absolutely no trust in any calculations on China's potential economic growth rate. How can we have an accurate calculation without any reliable basic data pool?" Yu questioned several aspects of the official data, including employment, government revenue, and investments in manufacture. Take employment, for example. According to China's official statistics, 10 million jobs were created as of December last year. But Yu said the number doesn't fit China's GDP growth rate. This is because in order to create 10 million jobs, there needs to be at least a 3% increase in the GDP. He also mentioned the problem of unemployment. College graduates in China, for example, are finding it hard to find jobs. Many migrant workers are also losing their jobs. These all suggest a harsh economic situation. He then looked at statistics on government revenue. Official data says the budgeted revenue for 2020 is over $3 trillion. Yu, however, said this would only be possible if the GDP growth rate reaches 5.4%, which did not happen. A Chinese official also admitted there are problems with China's official economic figures. Yin Zhongqing is the deputy director of the Finance and Economics Committee of the CCP's National People's Congress. According to a Chinese media report last March, Yin said the aggregate GDP all of provinces is larger than the national GDP. He also admitted that fraud in China's official economic figures has been long existing. Yin said this is because some local regions compete with each other and falsify their numbers. A legal daily reporter also listed some deeper causes for this phenomenon. Some of the causes include local officials' desire to perform well in leadership evaluations and the need to balance local numbers. The careers of these local officials also depend on local economic figures. Reporting by Wen Hui, NTD News.
12 workers left trapped underground are still alive after an explosion at a gold mine in eastern China. This, according to information retrieved from the site.
More than 20 workers remain trapped 2,000 feet underground. They're inside a gold mine in China's eastern Shandong province and have been stuck there since an explosion on January 10th. The accident wasn't reported until 30 hours after the blast. The mining company now faces severe backlash over its failure to report the accident. 2 of the company's senior supervisors have been fired. A rescue team sent down supplies using zip lines, including food, nutrient solution, flashlights, paper, and pens. Trapped workers have since sent up notes saying 12 people are safe and 4 among them are injured. 10 are still missing.
Biden's pick for the head of intelligence community suggests the new administration sees China as a global competitor instead of an adversary. NTD's Penny Zhou has more.
At the confirmation hearing, lawmakers questioned Biden's pick for National Intelligence Director about threats posed by China.
Is China, under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, an adversary of the United States?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I couldn't agree more with the priority that you're attaching to China and the need, I think, for the intelligence community to focus on this issue. I think in the context of China, China is adversarial and an adversary on some issues, and in other issues we try to cooperate with them, whether in the context of climate change or other things. And ultimately, the frame that the president-elect has identified for thinking about this is as a global competitor.
She said if confirmed, she will focus on countering China over issues where it is an adversary. President Trump previously called China the biggest foreign adversary.
They're a foe in many ways, but they're an adversary. My fellow Americans.
As President Trump comes to the end of his term, he's still rushing to get more executive orders against China. That includes asking U.S. investors to stop pouring money into Chinese military-linked firms and sanctioning officials and companies involved in China's aggression in the South China Sea. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The CEO of investment group Blackstone says the new U.S. administration will take a softer tone with China. Speaking at a forum in Hong Kong, he said the U.S. and China have a, quote, substantial overlap of interest, adding that he expects less tension between the two countries. Blackstone is one of the biggest firms on Wall Street and has major investments in China. The CEO has donated to President Trump's re-election campaign and is involved in U.S.-China trade talks. He recently said he's now ready to help Biden and his team. The United States is calling on China to allow World Health Organization experts to interview caregivers, former patients, and lab workers in Wuhan City. The team of experts also requests access to medical data and samples. The CCP virus is believed to have emerged in late 2019 in the city. The international team of 13 experts started a 2-week quarantine last Thursday. That's after they arrived in Wuhan. For now, they're holding teleconferences with their Chinese counterparts before starting on-the-ground work. The goal of the study is to determine the origins of the CCP or Chinese Communist Party virus. Chinese experts have already completed the first phase of research, something criticized by the U.S. American officials say China should share all scientific data of animal, human, and environmental samples taken in Wuhan. Australia also called for the WHO team to have access to relevant data, information, and key locations. The Chinese Communist regime responded to the two countries, labeling their calls as political pressure. A new U.S. government report reveals more links between the CCP virus and a lab in Wuhan, the Chinese city where the pandemic first emerged. NTD's Penny Zhou has more about the lab's background.
Scientists have largely dismissed the theory that the CCP virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan, often dismissing the claim as a conspiracy theory.
So you're 100% confident there was no leak, no accident?
I'm confident there's no leak.
100%?
100%.
But now, a U.S. State Department report reveals more links between the virus and the lab. It says several of the lab's researchers became sick in fall 2019 before the outbreak started. Their symptoms similar to those of the CCP virus. The report also says one type of virus found in bats and studied in the lab is over 96% similar to the CCP virus. It's the closest sample so far. So what exactly is studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and why do some claim the U.S. government has been funding it? The French government helped China build the lab after the 2003 SARS outbreak. Originally, a French architect was supposed to design it, but Chinese authorities later handed the project over to a local Wuhan architect. French intelligence found the Chinese architect company had close ties to the Chinese military. A Radio France report last year revealed how Beijing broke its promise of cooperation and gradually excluded French scientists from the lab's work. To their dismay, the French scientists were never allowed to participate once the lab was built. Experts soon started questioning the Chinese lab's lack of transparency. A French media outlet also cited a Chinese state media report, saying researchers from the lab had disposed waste that wasn't properly treated first. The report also said researchers there were selling animals used in studies to the Wuhan market. The institute was also receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money from the U.S. National Institute of Health. The grant was meant for research into coronavirus strains found in bats, notably those found in the U.S. and other countries. It was funneled through nonprofit organization EcoHealth Alliance. The group's main contact person between it and the Wuhan lab is among the WHO experts currently visiting Wuhan, investigating the origin of the virus. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
As more CCP virus cases emerge across China, reports of people suddenly collapsing have resurfaced. The latest report comes from Hebei province. A video posted online shows a person lying on the ground, motionless, near a virus testing site in Lanfang City last week. 3 first responders dressed in full-body protective suits attempted to save the patient, with dozens of bystanders watching. A similar incident struck northeastern Heilongjiang province 3 weeks ago. That's when a person wearing a black coat suddenly collapsed outside a police security post. Similar cases were also reported in other provinces last spring, during one of the most serious stages of China's outbreak. Similar reports streamed in from across the country. The majority described the same odd situation, people collapsing on the street without warning. The resulting deaths were thought to be linked to the pandemic, but Chinese authorities gave no explanation in the reports, nor were there any autopsy reports from the victims published. Now we look to the makeshift hospitals popping up in China, created specifically to treat the CCP virus. An online video shows a large-scale makeshift hospital in Hebei province has been set up as of last week. The province is currently the most hard hit by the virus in China. Several regions and cities close to Hebei have already banned entry for vehicles and travelers from this province. The makeshift hospital will be used as a quarantine center after it's finished. The construction is in progress 24/7. The facility's 3,000 isolation rooms will be finished in the next 15 days. They're built to house one person per room. To maintain total isolation, patients there won't be allowed to exit their rooms either. Staff members will deliver meals to each room, but those inside will be blocked from having direct contact with outsiders. Patients admitted to the hospital not only fight the disease, but must also combat the psychological pressure caused by social isolation. Ms. Wang, who works for Shijiazhuang City's Pandemic Prevention and Control Department, revealed more details to Radio Free Asia early last week. She said a large-scale quarantine center is now under urgent construction in another city in Hebei province. It will serve as yet another makeshift hospital, offering more than 5,000 beds. Authorities say more large-scale isolation centers will be set up in the future. A Beijing spokesperson denies China's forced labor practices, but we spoke with a human rights activist who says his father experienced it firsthand. NTD's Don Ma has more on the story.
Beijing is calling accusations of forced labor in China the biggest lie of the past 100 years. That's according to a tweet from China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying on Thursday. The comment comes in response to the U.S.'s decision to ban all cotton and tomato product imports from China's Xinjiang region. The ban is part of intensifying U.S. scrutiny on Beijing's forced labor practices. A report in 2018 found that over 570,000 members of China's Uyghur minority were forced to pick cotton in the region. Forced labor is widely believed to be a commonplace and profitable practice in Chinese detention centers and prisons. For decades, China's prison economy has been known to provide big business for the regime. In a report from March 2020, the Congressional Executive Commission on China listed Nike and Coca-Cola as companies suspected of having ties to forced labor in Xinjiang. The companies lobbied against a bill banning products linked to forced labor. According to a 2019 report by the World Organization to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong, there are nearly 700 prison slave labor enterprises in China. New Zealand-based human rights activist Xinjiang shared with us his father's experience inside a prison in Henan province. This prison has been described as the worst prison in the province. Inmates are forced to work 13 hours a day, 7 days a week.
According to prison law, work cannot exceed 8 hours a day. Saturday and Sunday legally are rest days, but they do not let us rest. We work more than 10 hours a day. But when inspectors come to inspect, they lie and say we work for 8 hours.
Those who fail to meet their quotas are pinned down by other inmates and beaten by prison guards. He recounts that his father endured such severe beatings that his skull fractured. He went into a coma for more than 20 days.
Prisoners have been beaten to the point of being crippled, to being blinded. There are many cases. My father wrote to the warden to report the issue, but the warden would not solve the problem.
Xinjiang explained that prison guard dogs often eat better than inmates in this prison, but adds that inmates who are former CCP officials get much better treatment.
There is one person named Li Xintheng, a former Henan County mayor. He does not work. There is also a son Menchia. He's a former municipal party secretary. He eats very well. He does not work. He gets very good treatment. If you have money, cigarettes and wine can be brought in for you. If you don't have money, then nothing can be brought in.
Xinjiang says in some cases, inmates can bribe the prison with a large sum of money in order to avoid doing forced labor. For example, some prisoners don't work and even use computers meant to monitor the facility to play video games. Xinjiang recounted that after being released, his father looked like an old man. Reporting by Don Ma, NTD News.
The Trump administration declassified a national security document on Tuesday. It's known as the U.S. Strategic Framework for the Indo-Pacific and represents the blueprint of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. Trump's National Security Council developed it through the course of 2017. The move to declassify is an unusual one. In the U.S., classified documents are typically declassified once they are 25 years old. Accordingly, the 10-page document was not due for public release until 2043. President Trump's 2017 national security strategy recognizes that the U.S. is at a crossroads between freedom and repression. The White House called it the biggest challenge America and its allies are now facing. China is the primary state actor of concern mentioned in the document. The policy outlines the U.S. strategy to cooperate with its regional partners in confronting threats from China. The document also envisions India's growing importance and highlights Taiwan's role in defending against the Chinese regime's military aggression. Based on the assumption that China will become increasingly assertive in its attempts to unify Taiwan with mainland China. The policy laid out steps to defend the first island chain nations, including Taiwan, and in case of a conflict, it says the U.S. should restrain China's air and sea dominance inside the first island chain and maintain absolute dominance outside of it. In efforts to establish partnerships, the policy listed helping Taiwan develop defense capabilities as an objective. That's so the island can ensure security and freedom. The framework also outlines support for India as the primary regional counterpart to China. This approach is likely to worry Beijing, especially its labeling of India as an important pillar of the Indo-Pacific framework. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien explained the U.S. approach to regional development seeks to ensure all partners can protect their sovereignty. Quite the opposite from China's. O'Brien criticized Beijing for increasing pressure on Indo-Pacific nations and for pushing them to prioritize the Chinese regime's so-called common destiny over their own freedom and sovereignty. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.